What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Great American Reform. My name is Colton Furlow, and I like to wish you a happy Freedom Friday. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm wearing such a awful and offensive shirt. It says racism, noun, anyone who wins a argument with a liberal. The reason I am wearing this is because today we're going to be talking about a core issue that is in desperate need of reform within our nation, and that is election reform. The Republicans and the right have already started initiatives to further this agenda of election reform, election integrity, voter ID and such. And the left has combated that with, well, it's voter suppression, it's just racist against minorities, with barely any backup or defense whatsoever. They're just pulling the race card once again because they have no other defense for any argument other than, well, that's just racist. We can't have that because that's racist. Well, today we're going to explain how that's not racist and explain why we need election reform and voter ID. But before we get into that, I'd like to apologize. I probably sound like all stuffy. My allergies are really acting up down here in South Carolina. I feel just so congested. I feel nasally. I can't breathe out of my nose anyway because I have deviated septum. So it's just not going well. And my eyes are like puffy and swollen and they're itchy. So I'm not high, I promise. It's just allergies. They're not fun. But before we get into the actual topic of today's video, I'm going to give you an update of what's been going on the past week. This past Monday, I was at the Horry County Republican Women's Club with Red Hats America. We kind of like partnered with them, but it was the Republican Women's Club event. They had Lucretia Hughes, Scott Pressler, and Savannah Craven at their event. Savannah sang her song Be Like Candace. I'm sure you guys heard it if you are into politics. And then Lucretia Hughes did one of her speeches, and she got everyone very fired up. She talked about God, she talked about Black America, she talked about how the Republicans are just sitting down and losing this fight, and we really need to step up and come to the plate if we want to have any chance of taking back the House and Senate in 2022, and then eventually the White House in 2024. And then Scott Pressler did like a whole presentation of how we can run for office, what we need to do to run for office. His goal was to tell us that, you don't have to run for the state level. You don't have to run for Congress. You don't have to run for Senate. You don't have to run for president. He wants us to take over the school boards, the city councils, the county commissioners. That's where the real change starts to happen. The Democrats were extremely smart in what they did. They took over all the school boards, the city councils, the mayorships, and everything, while we were just too busy focusing on the House, the Senate, and the White House. They took over small America. And now they also have big America because we weren't able to keep big America. So they have everything into one now. So his point was, take over these things. So we are coming for a total 100% takeover in 2022. And then he also explained to us how we need to be out there getting Republicans registered to vote. I don't know if you saw it, but Kelly Griffin, the one who had the head of Donald Trump, standing up somewhere. It was like the bloody, chopped his head off, whatever. She is scared of what Scott Pressler's doing and actually tweeted out or reshared one of his posts. And she was explaining like, oh my gosh, they're getting Republicans registered to vote. God forbid we actually do what we're supposed to be doing here in our civic duty of getting people registered to vote so they can also perform their civic duty. She's worried about that we're doing that, while I think it's because they are actually terrified that their tyrannical reign is going to be over here within the next year. And I cannot wait to see the downfall and the crumble of the regime. That's what I like to call it. It's definitely a regime. I can't wait to see the downfall of it and just watch the left just burn down and crumble. So then Monday night, we went to the Horry County GOP meeting. And that is a disaster in itself. It's just a complete circus, and they're just a bunch of wackos who want to actually burn it down here in South Carolina. They want to take the establishment that we really don't have here in South Carolina and completely burn it down, replace it, and fill it with these Linwood supporters. The exec board decided to put a resolution on the agenda before anyone even knew about it. And then we get to the meeting, and the resolution was to censure Drew McKissick, who is the state GOP chairman. They wanted to do it for absolutely no reason other than because they hate him because he beat Linwood. Drew was an incumbent. Linwood was the challenger. He decided to come up from Georgia because he knew he wasn't going to have any power in Georgia, so now he came to South Carolina. He's one of those QAnon conspiracy theorists too. So he got everyone riled up here in South Carolina. He's like, we need to take out the establishment. Blah, 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 blah. Well, he lost very badly to Drew McKissick. And Drew McKissick was also endorsed 3 times by President Donald J. Trump. So if you are an actual MAGA supporter and you support Trump, why are you going against his vote, or endorsement rather, 3 times? Trump endorsed him 3 times, and yet these ding-dongs didn't vote for him. So now they're just trying to censure him over something that he said, which he had every right to say, and he was actually very right for saying it. It's just a long story, but they did vote to censure him. And at the last line of the resolution, it says something about we need to censure him because of his disregard for party rules. Well, the HCGOP has no idea how a meeting should be ran. The unofficial parliamentarian has to stand up every 5 seconds and interject within the board and the attendees because either the board is going out of order, they don't know the rules, and it's just a complete disaster. So I think it was kind of ironic how the HCGOP exec board wants to censure someone over who doesn't follow the rules, supposedly, when they have absolutely no recollection of any rule that should be followed within the HCGOP. I'm sure they've probably read the title of Robert's Rules of Order, and that's about it. I can assure you they've never opened the book because it's a disaster the way they run a meeting, and shame on every single exec board member who doesn't know how to grab order within the meeting, let alone know how to run one. So that's besides the point. That's my little rant because it's absolutely appalling and ironic and hypocrisy. So today's video, election reform, election integrity, everything that we need to secure our elections right here in the United States to ensure that we have a fair outcome. Now, we all know that this past election absolutely had irregularities. And that's been proven. There has definitely been fraud, whether you believe that or not, there has been. Arizona right now, they're bringing everything to light. Hopefully they start to realize it and the left just starts to crumble and crumble and crumble until there's nothing left of them. So it's very sad to see, well, not sad for us, it's very sad for the Democrats to see what's actually happening out in Arizona. You know, the people woke up and they got the audit, and now the results are coming in, and it doesn't really look good for the left, and I can't wait to see the final results and see if any other states continue to follow those exact same results. What we need to do within election reform is we need to first get away and do away with all these election machines. You know, they've been hacked before. Supposedly there have been acts of hacking from Germany within the Dominion things, but we're not going to get into that. You can do your own research on all that, but we definitely need to get rid of these machines, and we need to go back to paper ballots. I don't care how long it takes to count on these paper ballots, but that's exactly what needs to be done. It's less room for mistake. It's less room for mechanical and electronic error because you're actually filling it out yourself. So that is step number 1. We are going to get rid of these electronic voting machines. And if this isn't done by the time I decide to run for office, this is going to be one of the most biggest things that I will be pushing when I am in office. And if I ever do become president, 2036 possibly, we are going to make sure that our elections are completely true and honest with the least amount of margin of error. So, but for now, I really hope these conservative and Republican legislatures actually really step up to the plate and go through with the bills and pieces of legislation that they're actually trying to pass. So that's step one. Step two is that we are going to force a voter ID. Now, this is where it has become a racist thing, according to the left, is us as conservative Republicans and just common sense Americans want a voter ID to verify who you are before you get to vote in our presidential election, or any election for that matter. Can someone just please explain to me what is so wrong about wanting to verify you are who you say you are? What is so wrong about that? You know, we've had dead people vote. We've had illegal people vote. We've had people who can't vote. We've had people vote twice. We've had ballots given out twice to people. So why can we not just have a voter ID to ensure that they are who they say they are? Now, where the Democrats start saying that it's voter suppression and racist for that is because they literally said, you know, well, lower income developments and minority places, especially the minority. This is where it really gets racist because of the minorities. Well, they don't have access to all these things to get a voter ID. Do they drive? Yeah. Well, what do you need to drive with? Driver's license? Well, where do you go to get that? The DMV. Where do you go to register to vote? Also the DMV through the Motor Voter Act. So, if they can drive, get their driver's license, I'm pretty sure they can get a voter ID. So let's just go through some of the things that you need in ID to do. Number one, to drive. Number two, for medical reasons such as prescriptions. Number three, to drink. Number four, to smoke. Number five, to get into clubs. Number six, to purchase a house. Number seven, to purchase a car. All these things you need an ID for. So what is so bad about getting a voter ID? Could it be that if we have a voter ID, that we are actually able to verify who's voting in the elections and actually make sure that no one who shouldn't be voting is voting? Could that be the reason? No, it's definitely not. It's just because we're racist. Absolutely, that's because we're racist. Well, let's go through another thing. You know, they also say these minority communities and lower income communities don't have the money to purchase a voter ID. Well, this is one thing that I would gladly spend my tax dollars on, is ensuring our elections are safe. So I would be totally okay with my tax dollars going to making voter IDs for everyone for free. I would be totally okay with that. I'd rather it go to that than funding abortions in Pakistan. So that's number one. And it would also be a lot better than putting all this money in politicians' pockets. So that'd be number two. So I would absolutely love for my tax money to go to create a free ID to vote for someone. But I really want to bring this thing up because, you know, the left was talking about all the minority communities and low-income communities that just can't afford it. Let's see here. The highest percentage of people who smoke and purchase cigarettes come from household income less than $35,000. That is the highest percentage of people who smoke. That's 21.4% people in household incomes less than $35,000. There's only 11.4% of people with an income $75,000 to $100,000. Why can they spend all this money on cigarettes, yet, according to the left politicians, they can't afford to go out and get a voter ID? Makes sense to you, right? No, it absolutely does not. It's hogwash. It's pathetic. It's stupid. Let's go to the demographics of race. You know, I hate talking about race, but if we're going to from the left, then we're going to do it here. All right. In 2018, the percentage of people who used any illicit drug of white people was 12%. The percentage of African Americans in 2018 was 13.7% used any illicit drug. We go down to alcohol, White was 56.8%, black only was 43%. Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander was 43.6%, Hispanic was 44.7%. Any tobacco, we all went through that just a minute ago with cigarettes and stuff. All that is from the CDC, so if you want to fact check me, just go ahead, right to the CDC. It's right there for you. So if these people in the minority communities and lower income communities can afford tobacco, alcohol, and drugs, why can't they afford a voter ID? And why can't the government ban these things if it kills people? Why? Because it puts money in their pockets. Duh. And if it puts money in their pockets, they're not going to ban it. And they're also not going to enforce voter ID if they can track who is voting and verify who is voting, because then they can't cheat. Duh. This is how this works. It's all crap. It's pathetic to know that our government is pulling the race card on something that would ensure fair, free, and verified elections. So I'm sure you have seen what's happening in Texas, where they were going to vote on a voter integrity bill in the House, and 50-some House Democrats decided to get on a private jet and take off to Washington. You know, you were voted in there to fight and duke out whatever bill may come to the table, and you're expected to fight it out, whether you win or lose, because guess what? You're not going to win every battle when it comes to politics that you put yourself into. You're not going to get your way every time. So instead of them fighting and accepting the outcomes of the legal outcomes, I should say, of this vote, they take off to Washington, D.C. because they won't be able to have a full quorum in Texas to have a vote on it. So they went to D.C. and ran away from the problem. Could you imagine if any Republicans got on a private jet and went to Washington, D.C. to avoid voting and having a quorum to vote on any piece of legislation for that matter? Could you imagine the outcry? I can see it now. Oh, the Republicans just completely scared of what's happening. They hate our country. This is an insurrection. They are traitors. Give me a break. These people are absolutely pathetic. I hope these districts of these 50-some Democratic representatives in the Texas State House get flipped red this coming election, because it's sad to know that you have these cowards who would run away instead of staying there, number one, just fighting for their own side, but also not accepting a legal outcome. You know, I don't want to say not accepting the outcome, because I'm not accepting the presidential election outcome, because it was not fair, it wasn't legal, and it was fraud. So there's a difference between not accepting fraud and not accepting a legal vote. But do with that what you wish. You know, I expect to see a lot more states step up to the plate after all these different audits are finished, and I think these states are going to actually start pushing for more election integrity laws. We want to know who is voting in these elections. We want to know that these people are who they say they are. We want to know that they are actually allowed to vote. And we want to know that they are only voting once. And that's just the bottom line of it. We don't care about any of the other crap. You know, I've seen laws that they're saying that, well, you're not allowed to give out water to people in line staying at the voting polls. I don't care about that. You know, you can get rid of that. All I want to know is that the people who are voting in these elections are allowed to vote. They are who they say they are, and their purpose is to cast one ballot and not 10 different ballots. Dead people aren't voting. Just make it fair and free. What is so hard about that? I don't get it. You know, I just come to the full conclusion. I think there's so many other people out there that think this exact thing. The only reason the Democrats don't want voter integrity is because they can't cheat. I mean, I've known there's been fraud a little bit here and there, both sides throughout different elections, but not widespread like this, where you have the Supreme Court and the Secretary of State of, let's say, Pennsylvania was one of them, changing election laws like 5 days before the election. No, that doesn't happen. And the whole mail-in ballot thing was a scam. The whole pandemic was a scam. I think it was all completely planned out, and it just fit right into the Democrats' hands. You know, they had this pandemic come and hit you, which forced people to stay inside. So then they had to do these mail-in ballots, and then they would be able to see who voted for what, and then they toss the ballots, or these mail-in ballots get lost, supposedly. Or I've had a friend get 3 ballots to their name, the same address, 3 same ballots, so they could vote it 3 times if they wanted to. It was all a scam. The whole mail-in ballots need to be thrown out. So the other thing to election integrity and election reform is getting rid of these mail-in ballots and absentee ballots. There should only be a certain number of limitations and reasons why you would need to send in an absentee ballot. You know, medical reasons, you're just not going to be in the state, whatever. Not just because you don't want to go out and vote. The whole purpose of these elections are for you to go out, stand in line. I don't care if you're staying there for 10 hours. That is called your civic duty. You get out there and you vote. If you don't do it, then sorry, you don't get to vote. You've made your decision to stay in your house and you don't get to vote. So therefore, you don't have any reason to have an opinion on what happens after the election or the results of the election if you didn't vote. That's your own stupidity, that's your own fault. So we also need to get rid of these mail-in ballots because it's just an absolute disaster in itself. So these are just a few small but very major steps that we can take to start ensuring that our country has the fair and free elections that we are supposed to have without fraud in elections that we can just put our full trust into. I could go on and on about all this, but I am going to be doing a video sometime probably within the next month where I will be going out to different minority communities and low-income communities and just asking people if, like, hey, do you have an ID, like a driver's license or any form of ID, and see what they say. And then I'll also ask them if they think it's racist to have an ID to vote. And I can bet you they're going to have an ID, and I bet you they're going to say it's not racist to have a voter ID to ensure fair, free elections. So that's going to be coming up probably within the next month and a half. I'll try to get to that at some point. So tomorrow I leave for Student Action Summit in Tampa, Florida. It's hosted by Turning Point USA. Extremely excited about that. I hope I get to meet, you know, just new people in general, but I hope I also get to meet some different congressmen and women and some different political powerhouses and see if we can connect with like red hats or something. We're going to be trying to host this event on September 5th. That's a tentative date in Maryland, Cumberland, Maryland, my hometown, at the Rocky Gap Amphitheater. I'm going to have like a Labor Day weekend Western Maryland Freedom Bash. Have like small business vendors where they can set up, explain to everyone what their business is and give them information, and also have guest speakers and possibly a church service before the actual event starts. So hopefully we're gonna have like a big community event there this coming September. Nothing set in stone yet, but we're really working towards that. I know we got to get the ball rolling if we want to do it because we're running out of time. But I'm excited for things that are happening, and just stay tuned to the news. Listen to what's happening in Arizona because this election reform that I keep talking about starts in Arizona. These results are going to be the forefront of what's coming next. So with that being said, I hope you guys learned a little bit. I presented you with facts because I don't care about your feelings. You can look them all up at CDC. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Next week, I'll be talking about another issue that needs reform in this country. Not exactly sure which one yet. And then I'll also be doing a Student Action Summit recap. So yes, that's coming next week. So stay tuned to my social medias. You can like and follow The Great American Reform on Facebook, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to my mailing list on my website, greatamericanreform.com, so you get updates when these videos come out and everything else. And I would also like to ask you to follow and like Red Hats America on Facebook. And we also launched our official website that I have been working about 2.5 weeks on, so hard, probably up to like 3 a.m. every night. It's redhatsamerica.com. So check that out. And I just hope you guys have a great weekend. spend some time with family again. Make sure Joe Biden doesn't come and try to give you the jab or take your guns this weekend. You know, stand up for your rights, never back down to the left, and never cater to the left. So with that being said, I'll see you guys next week. Thank you. God bless.